Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Course Report podcast. I'm your host, Liz Eggleston from Course Report. Course Report is the most complete resource for coding boot camps. On our site, we have thousands of alumni reviews, tons of advice to choose the best boot camp for your career goals, and a full directory of every boot camp around the world. And on our podcast, we keep you updated each month with all of the latest news about the boot camp industry. And today I am thrilled to welcome Alicia Body, who is the founder of the VET TEC working group and is a tremendous advocate for veterans pursuing careers in tech. Alicia, thank you so much for joining me today, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Liz. Thanks so much for having me, and really thrilled to be talking about VET TEC.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we had to hop on for a quick emergency episode because, as you mentioned, there's been big news about VET TEC, and I want the Course Report community to hear it from the expert, and that is you. So should we get into it?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. All right. Here, I'll tell everyone the actual news, which is that on December 16th, 2024, the House sent the Dole Act to be signed by the president. That means that it was passed by the House, passed by the Senate, then voted and passed again by the House, and is now sitting on President Biden's desk. And the Dole Act is bipartisan. It does a lot to improve veteran health care and benefits. But what we are interested in today is that it includes the reauthorization of VET TEC. So let's start with just a quick refresher for those who might not be familiar, because if you're new to the bootcamp industry, you haven't been here in about a year, you may not even know what VET TEC is. So Alicia, can you explain what VET TEC is and why it's been such a game changer for veterans in the past?
Absolutely, yes. So VET TEC is an innovative VA education benefit that allows veterans to train in accelerated training programs like coding boot camps and make sure that those boot camps lead to high technology careers. So there's a big emphasis on getting a job after the training happens. Specifically, VET TEC works with these accelerated training providers that are between 6 weeks and 28 weeks in length, and it allows for this training to be done remotely, which is a little bit unique in the VA education space. Veterans are often able to use VET TEC for training that is not GI Bill approved. So there's some wrinkles there that really work in favor for veterans. It's also, VET TEC specifically works with these training providers that prioritize what the VA calls meaningful employment that happens within 6 months of graduation. So again, a really big focus on getting the training and the job as quickly as possible. And the VA does this by paying providers in installments. So 50% of the tuition is paid to training providers once a veteran secures that meaningful employment.
That is such a good point. Thank you for mentioning meaningful employment. I think that's one of the things that makes VET TEC probably such an innovative approach and a program that could be used as a model, maybe even outside of the VA when we think about career education. It's a reason that I've kept a close eye on VET TEC over the years. So, okay, thank you for that overview. And how many veterans used VET TEC during the pilot? Do we know?
Yes. So the pilot ran from April 2019 through November of 23, and over 14,000 veterans received training during that time. So it was a great 5-year opportunity. The program did exhaust its final round of funding on November 17th of 2023. And as you mentioned, it's been offline since then as we've worked through the legislative process to get it reauthorized and moved out of a pilot phase into a closer version of a permanent program.
Okay, so it's been a solid year since anyone has actually been able to use VET TEC. I have to say, like during that pilot period, I don't know how you kind of perceived it. I feel like it may have taken a minute to gain steam, but once it did, people loved VET TEC. I feel like veterans, students really loved it and like actually used it. I mean, there was never money left over, right? It was
Right.
constantly being used. Boot camps really liked being a part of it. Everyone was disappointed when vet tech would run out of funding, and when the pilot eventually actually ended, students were disappointed. So I feel like this is exciting to see actual new life given to vet tech now, and as you mentioned, some real notion of it being permanent.
Yes, absolutely. It was a huge, huge opportunity for veterans to access this training, especially remotely. Vet tech sort of hit its stride right as the pandemic was also ramping up and schools were moving to remote training. Because of the working group, training providers were able to work directly with the VA and get a lot of the kind of procedural kinks worked out really quickly. And so there was really very limited interruption in training for veterans as compared to, maybe some of the other VA education benefits. So we were a really tight-knit community of training providers and of veterans in the training, all working together to really see success. And we were able to get this reauthorization because of the success of the pilot. So a big thank you to all the veterans that participated and the training providers that were part of the pilot and offered their services up. We learned a lot. There's still, some things to work out as we implement this new legislation, but overall, just a really great opportunity. And again, an innovative program coming out of the VA. We should say that more. It's been really
Yeah,
great.
a lot of innovation there, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
And moving really
shockingly.
quickly, kind of some things that we may not associate with like some of the bureaucracy that we might typically associate with the VA, but like quick moving, a lot of innovation. I love to see it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned some of those initial training partners. I know there were certainly training partners outside of coding boot camps that were part of vet tech, of course. But there were probably what, like 25 or so boot camps that were a part of vet tech that were preferred or non-preferred boot camps as part of vet tech.
Yeah, at the
Yeah.
height of approvals and the height of the program, which was probably like 2021, we had between 25 and 30
Mm-hmm.
programs that were approved. Some schools may have had a couple of programs approved, and intentionally it was kept small. The VA really took a lot of pride in selecting training providers that not only had this cutting edge curriculum, but
Mm-hmm.
also prioritized that meaningful employment
Yes.
and could weather the tuition payments in structured format, the way the VA does it. That's certainly not for every training provider.
Great point. Yes. Okay, so what will be different this time around? You mentioned there have been some lessons learned. Do we know what will change in this iteration of vet tech?
Yes, so the reauthorization VET TEC 2.0, we'll call it here, has been reauthorized for 2 years as part of the Dole Act, and it will allow for 4,000 training spots per year. So historically, during the pilot, we counted money. The budget was $45 million, although we got some bumps along the way. But this time around, we're counting spots. So 4,000 individuals per fiscal year. Fiscal year starts on October 1. There's also been a decent amount of changes to the eligibility for both veterans and training providers. And so the VA will start digging into those legislative changes, and then we'll start building a process to make sure that veterans can be approved and training providers can be approved. But on the whole, it's the same idea. Training will be anywhere between 6 weeks and 28 weeks, and there'll be a lot more information coming. As I said, the VA needs to really dig through that legislation and have some discussions on their side about what Congress wants them to do and then how they can implement that.
For sure. Okay, and then did you say it would consume some of that GI Bill eligibility this time around?
Yeah, so one of the big changes
Mm-hmm.
for on the veterans side is that during the pilot, veterans just needed GI Bill, like Chapter 33 of
Mm-hmm.
eligibility remaining. They could have 1 day remaining and receive full vet tech benefit. Now in vet tech 2.0, the VA will consume some of your GI Bill. One of the things they're trying to figure out is how much of that. It may not be the same math as as training providers are used to or veterans are used to.
Yeah.
But that is written in the legislation that some GI Bill will be consumed. But again, we're very early days on the VA side trying to figure out what that means and how that will look to veterans.
Details are TBD.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, what is the timeline that we're talking about? You mentioned October 1st as the beginning of the fiscal year. So, is that the date that a student could attend a boot camp on VET
I'm
TEC this year?
I'm hopeful that it's sooner.
Okay.
So once the bill is signed, it is law and it is technically live, but the VA will need probably about 4 to 6 months to dive through the legislation and stand up these new processes,
Okay.
again, both to approve veterans and to approve training providers. All training providers will have to be reapproved. No one is unfortunately grandfathered in from the pilot. There's just been too many changes. We'll be starting from scratch. But I would hope in that next 4 to 6 months that we can start to approve some veterans, start to approve some training providers, knowing that we only have 2 years. It will be really important to get both of those groups online as quickly as possible and training and into jobs so that we can go back to Congress and say, this has worked really well. Can you give us 2 more years or 10 more years and give us a little space to really implement this program again?
Is so true. Yes. Time is of the essence. 2 years. Okay. So, if I'm a veteran, what should I be doing to prepare right now? Like, how can I make sure that I get one of those 4,000 spots in 2025?
Yes. So, for all the veterans listening, I highly recommend that you sign up for updates via email from VA Education. Make sure that your account with the VA Education office is up to date, that you secured your GI Bill eligibility. Sometimes you have to do a little paperwork on the front end of that to make sure that your post 9/11 is available, and just make sure that all of your paperwork is in order so that when the new approval process is rolled out, you can apply and get that certificate of eligibility as soon as possible. And then that will be your ticket to go to an approved training provider and connect the dots between VET TEC and that training provider.
Okay, fantastic. And I should also mention that we have a blog post on Course Report where Alicia is the expert and provided a lot of the information for that blog post. So we will update that when we publish this podcast episode, and we'll have all of that information in the blog post as well. And Alicia, talk to providers or coding bootcamp like operators for a minute. For providers who may have participated in the pilot phase, what should they know? What will be different? You mentioned like we're starting from scratch.
Yeah. Don't throw anything away. Hopefully you've kept all your records from the VET TEC pilot program. I would anticipate the approval process looking very similar. So if you were part of the pilot, you've probably done 80% of the work. The forms will likely look a little different. We may ask for some different information as the VA is trying to approve new programs, but I would anticipate about 80% of the information being the same. So if you're waiting and want to do something with that nervous energy, go ahead and get those forms updated, re-familiarize yourself with those forms. I think that'll be a great way to kind of get ahead of the curve once the approval process is released. Again, the VA will release that, and then I will certainly share that. I've got a VET TEC working group on LinkedIn, and I personally share it on LinkedIn quite a bit. Once these new approvals are available for both veterans and providers, I'll be sure to share that. Certainly give you the information, Liz, so we can get it out as quickly as possible. But if you were part of the pilot, you've done most of the work, so you'll be in good shape.
Okay, and what if you were not part of the pilot? What if you are considering applying for the first time as a provider? How should you approach it?
Yes, so don't hesitate to apply. It's an incredible program, and again, a really great way to get more veterans into your training. My 2 points would be make sure that your curriculum is aligned to finding meaningful employment within 6 months. That is a huge priority for this program. We need veterans training and getting jobs quickly so that again they're seeing success as quickly as they want to, and also we can show the success of vet tech as a whole. And then I'd also, from an operational standpoint, make sure that your school is set up to receive tuition payment in those installments. So like the pilot, providers will be paid 25% at enrollment, 25% at graduation, and then another 50% once that meaningful employment is secured, the form is filled out, and the VA has a chance to pay you. So, it can take, depending on the length of the program and the length of job finding, it can take months to receive those payments. So just make sure that your school is set up to not only track those payments, but sort of manage that cash flow so that you can focus on training the veterans and not, hounding the VA, right? But there's a lot of providers that have done it really well. So, and I'm always available as a resource to help schools set up processes that will set them up for success on that.
And Alicia, is that payment scheme only for preferred bootcamp partners as part of vet tech, or is that also for non-preferred?
It'll be for everyone.
Everyone. Okay.
Preferred providers during the pilot program signed a form that said if someone didn't receive meaningful employment within that 6 months, they would actually refund 100% of the tuition. Vet Tech 2.0 has not eliminated that provision, but it's not a way to get preferred status anymore. Preferred status, I think, will be based on outcomes, which actually should help veterans pick a school that's good for them. But there won't be as much refunding of 100% tuition. That was one of the things we learned during the pilot that sounded really good from a policy standpoint, but it became very problematic for a lot of training providers. So no, there shouldn't be as much refunding, but everyone will get paid in those installments.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, we have put Alicia's contact info, her email address, in her lower third there, and we'll also add it to the show notes. I basically refer anyone who has questions about VA benefits, vet tech, the GI Bill, anything, to Alicia. So I absolutely recommend getting in touch with her if you run a boot camp and need help with this process. She is a tremendous resource. So yeah, I mean, before we wrap this up, is there anything else you'd like to add, Alicia? Any other dollars specifically for veterans to be aware of in 2025? I feel like last year there was VRAP, a couple of others that ended. Is there anything else that's on the horizon or that you're hearing whispers of that could be interesting to keep an eye out for in the upcoming year?
Yeah, no, thank you, Liz, for being such a great partner in all of this over the years too. I don't have any inside knowledge on any kind of short-term funding, like the VRAP, right? But I would put a plug in for Chapter 33, Veteran Readiness and Employment, formerly known as VOC Rehab. It's a really incredible benefit that I'm not sure as many veterans take advantage of that could. So I highly recommend anyone interested, especially if you've exhausted your GI Bill benefits, take a look at Chapter 33. There is an approval process for that. But you could use that benefit at many of these same training providers and really utilize that benefit as well. So take a look at that. And, I think once we get vet tech back online, maybe there'll be some more conversations. But for now, all eyes on vet tech, and hopefully we're up and running soon.
I love that. I feel like I learn something new every time I talk to you. You don't think it's insider information, but it truly is. Because yeah, it is so helpful to be able to get all that information out to our readers. We will update that blog post. We'll add Chapter 33 to that blog post as well. Yeah, I mean, Alicia, I think that there will be a lot more to talk about this year. But for now, I will just say Thank you so much for joining me for this quick emergency episode about the state of vet tech as we start 2025. I think this gives both schools and students a little checklist to start thinking about. And as always, we love your feedback, so thank you for tuning in, and please feel free to email us at hello@coursereport.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help other future boot campers find it by going to iTunes or wherever you found this episode, subscribing to the Course Report podcast, and leaving us a review. We will see you on the next one. Thanks, Alicia.
Thanks, Liz.